Friends, namaskar to all of you and welcome to the first episode of this series Tukaayan. I will let you guess about what or about whom we will be talking for just a couple more minutes, because of course, I have to welcome all of you from all over the globe watching the series, and I'm so thrilled. And if all of you remember that in 2020 and 2021 there was a series that had come on my channel and somebody else's channel on YouTube called Kabiriyat, in which we spoke about the philosophy of Kabir, and at the end of each session we did a doha of Kabir Sahab. Similar to that, we are going to do a session called Tukayan, and the legendary saint on whom it is based. I'm sure many of you would have guessed by the name Tuka that I said. We are going to be talking about the philosophy of Sant Tukaram Maharaj, one of the most popular saints of Maharashtra and saints of the masses, as he was called, because his abhang, meaning his literature, his words, were so close and appealing to the masses. And the person who is going to be the main presenter of this series is going to be none other than the same person who did Kabiriyat with me all those years ago, and she is a Hindi lecturer and a Marathi tutor at Oxford University in the UK. Such an amazing thing, isn't it? Spreading our culture in a foreign land and teaching our language and inspiring people over there to dive deep into our culture and our tradition. And so, please welcome from Oxford, UK, Srimati Ashwini Mokashi, or Dr. Ashwini Mokashi, I should say. Ashwini Tai, welcome. Namaskar to you, and it is so wonderful to have you. And of course, all the spade work, the background work, and all the hard work basically it's all yours, and it is your brainchild. So I hand the presentation over to you, and I'm sure everybody is going to be absolutely thrilled and very amazed by the things that you're going to be sharing about Sant Tukaram Maharaj. So over to you, Ashwini.
Well, thank you so much, Manoj. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here, working with you, to be doing this series with you, and to be talking about Sant Tukaram Maharaj, who, as you said, is extremely popular. And we grew up, our childhood was full of stories of all these saints, and always hearing about Sant Tukaram Maharaj. So the name itself is known to every Marathi child, no matter where they're brought up.
Right.
And also beyond Maharashtra, the influence is extremely great from the Bhakti movement and, from the saints' literature. And just the fact that so many of his abhangas are put to music, and they are sung by very, very popular musicians
Artists.
in India. So it's a great pleasure. And he is known as Jagat Guru. So Jagat Guru is, Guru of the whole world. So it's, his kirti just keeps on growing, and his name becomes more and more familiar. Now, recently, I noticed that the Pune International Airport, which is being built, a new sort of, it's expanded. And that is also called now Jagat Guru Tukaram Maharaj Airport.
Wow, that's so amazing, isn't it? I think it's probably the first and it's maybe the first instance that a saint's name has been given to an airport in India, or maybe in the world, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know about that. I'll have to think about that.
yeah,
But it's amazing. It's just totally amazing.
yeah.
And he was popular not just because of his writing, but also because all the legends that are attached to him, and about the sensitive nature of his character, and just the sheer volume of suffering that he went through in his life, and still came out, sounding very happy,
Positive.
sounding cheerful, being extremely humble throughout his life, despite all his ups and downs, and being very grounded. Just before we're thinking about this program, I was wondering what stories to talk about him, and then I realized there are so many stories. It's like if I think about one story, I feel like oh, but I should also talk about the other one. So the stories are just abounding, and
Right.
and I hope to carry this parampara through forward, and make it available to those people who are interested in these matters, in the Bhakti movement, in the abhangas, or in approaching these ancient literatures, or well, not quite ancient, but medieval literature,
Yeah.
in a way that can be still relevant today.
Right.
And just as we did last time, we looked at Saint Kabir's philosophy
Correct.
from the point of view of how is it relevant today? Is it relevant today, first of all? And if it is, then what does it teach us? And of course, there is a whole sort of sector of spiritual followers or spiritual critiques who look at it solely from the spiritual point of view. So I thought, everybody in a way is a spiritual person. So
Sure.
we always have that aspect in us. But we also want to look at it from point of view of what can we use this for today? How is his teaching relevant today? So last time he had used the word philosophical counseling, and how those nuggets of thoughts become relevant in today's world as well. And so we'll try to do that. We'll try to put the philosophy of Sant Tukaram Maharaj in a rhetoric that sounds modern and that sounds relevant to today's youth.
Sure.
So this is sort of an approach of reintroducing, so to say, his philosophy to our young people.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I
Okay.
have a request. I think you had
Yeah.
mentioned in Kabiriyat as to what Doha means, which obviously we all know that it's a couplet. So you might just want to also talk about what's the literal meaning of the word abhang, so that people might be a little more clear as to what we are going to talk about. Abhang.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And this is going to be a conversation, so it's not a
Correct.
lecture, although I'm quite used to speaking at long, at a length. So please stop
Absolutely.
me,
Yeah.
and we'll make it a conversation. So
Absolutely.
abhanga is something that, that is made up of two sort of syllables, and bhanga. So bhanga is something that's breakable, and abhanga meaning something that's non-breakable. So it's a sort of Sanskrit prefix, and so abhangas were supposed to be padas or poems that were written by the saints, which were unbreakable,
Right.
in the sense they don't stop being relevant in some ways, and they don't stop teaching something.
Right.
So it's sort of it just by the nature of the word itself, it's sort of like immortal literature.
Correct.
And a lot of this information comes from the Vedas and Upanishads. So it's something that was rediscovered by every saint, and then it was taught to them. And as we said, we'll look at the spiritual interpretation as well, and we'll see what is it that keeps them being immortal,
Relevant.
because they're just very useful to everyone.
Correct.
So Sant Tukaram Maharaj, to give a brief outline of his life, was born in 1608 and he passed away in 1649. So he was a 17th century saint. And like for every historical figure, there are controversies about his exact year of birth and death.
Right.
But this is more or less accepted that he belonged to, that. And
So
he
in
was
fact,
a Marathi saint.
right. So I had a question with that regard. So would it be okay to say that he attained liberation in 1649, so to say, because he took samadhis, what I have heard? So would that be the right thing to say, or?
You could see that as a sort of matter of technicality,
Right.
although it's a kind of question that only a spiritual another spiritual saint can answer exactly when he got liberation, what kind of liberation.
Correct.
And as you know, people like us who are scholars like to go into all sorts of details and like to sort of not leave any stone unturned. In terms of but he definitely was considered as liberated, and it probably liberation or mukti or moksha.
Correct.
So saints are supposed to be jivan mukta, they achieve liberation during their lifetime itself. And those who are not as great as saints but who are spiritual people, attain liberation at the end of the life. So there are multiple different kinds of mukti that we talk about.
Okay. Yeah.
But that was a very interesting question. So thank you. Yeah.
Sure.
Liberation going to moksha. So again, since you brought up the topic, let me say that this whole philosophy is based on the fact that all the human beings are on their path to moksha.
Sure.
Whether we know this or not, whether we believe in God or not, whether we accept this or not, this is how life proceeds. And that is a basic principle or basic philosophy of Bhakti movement and sort of many Indian traditions. And then the idea is that what happens in that path and what happens to people like Sant Tukaram. So you might see that if Sant Tukaram was such a great saint, then why did he suffer so much? So you're kind of tested along the way, even if you have achieved a lot of seniority.
Correct.
On that path. So that doesn't stop. But what changes is how you react to these problems and how you handle those problems. And the question is, sort of like, it's like taking a high path, instead of reacting to problems. And, if somebody says something nasty to you, you say something nasty to them, and we get into a fight, and we are both sort of wounded soldiers.
Correct.
So these saints were not wounded soldiers. They were there to show through their deeds and actions how they handle things differently. So to go back to his biography, he was born in a family of well-to-do merchants, and his father was a saukar in Marathi, or a sahukar in Hindi, who would lend money to other people, and they would collect interest from them on the money, and they would sort of live like that. And they also had like a big merchant business where they would sell groceries and stuff. And he was a very competent and bright young man. So he was brought up to take on the mantle from his father. And he did that for many years. He successfully ran a business, and he was a very successful person. And at some point, something changed in his life, and the life became upside down. And he was heavily influenced by the spiritual currents, and he decided that the life of being a merchant in Saukar was not for him. And then he spent all his time doing bhakti, and it cost his family all the luxuries
riches.
That they were expecting to have all their life, and they became extremely poor. And it was a life of a lot of destitution, in other words.
Right.
So he was, however, very content because he realized that this is the right thing to do, and not just for himself, also for his family and for the society around him. And so he was extremely content, and his wife would never understand that. And funnily enough, his wife plays a huge part in this. She is sort of seen as a devil at times because she
Right.
vocalizes all her problems. She vocalizes going from, sort of going from being a rich man's wife to being a
Correct.
poor man's wife.
Poor man's.
She vocalizes her challenges in life, that she cannot feed her family, and that her family can just die any day. And he had two wives, and his first wife and son actually do die in famine, and that was also one of those influences which turned Sant Tukaram Maharaj into being a
saint.
spiritual person. So the second wife, who sort of was his longtime companion, is the one who he talks about even in his abhangas.
Abhangs,
And he talks about her, quite a lot. So in some ways, even though she's portrayed in this negative fashion, she must have played a big role in his life, that he feels a need to talk about her. And if
So
you
which
look
means-
at her from the point of view,
The
sorry.
more he was, the more she was negative, it probably urged him on to be more spiritual, I guess, right? To face that
Yeah,
sort of negativity. Yeah.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
And from a point of view of a woman, I can see that her challenges are real. I mean, her whole job is to be the house manager and to
Correct.
look after the family.
Correct.
And she needs the tools to look after the family.
Correct.
She needs the financial support. She needs her husband to be around, and she needs his guidance. And he was
Right.
guiding the whole world, but he wasn't. He was an absentee father
In
and
the
a
home,
husband.
yeah.
So yes, it was very difficult for her. But it's very interesting, how she continues to be critical, and how he continues to, in a way, both respect her by, giving her a lot of
Importance.
space into his life, into his abhangas, and at the same time, praying for her, but not listening to her advice. So it's a very, very interesting dynamic. We don't always see that in so many saints' lives. We see that if either they have very duty-bound wives who listen to them, or they have wives who they find very difficult to deal with, and they just become ascetics and
Right.
leave them.
Leave their homes.
Yeah. So here's a very interesting situation, which itself is very educational for us, because they do continue to live together and sort of make something of their. But more than that, the person who probably was most influential in his life was his spiritual guru called Babaji, and he gave initiation to Tukaram Maharaj in his dream. So we don't, I mean, it was influential in the spiritual way that he brought him to this path and made him continue on the spiritual journey.
Right.
But there are not a lot of stories that we read about him. But at the same time, if you look at his life from the point of view of what put him on this path,
Right.
then having a guru who can guide him was very important to him. And then the other factors that played into him was that, the entire society around him was, for the longest time, very, very negative towards him. And they thought that he had just become incompetent and uninterested in life, and this was his way of running away from all the problems, and then he wasn't somebody that we should really sort of take seriously.
Follow.
And then he proves them all wrong, and then he sort of, establishes himself and his bhakti path to an extent that that they just realize that they completely missed out on recognizing a diamond among them. So very, very interesting story. And over the series we will go into many details of his life and many actual stories or legends that are built around him. So
Nice.
does that sound like a good plan?
Yes, of course.
Okay, great.
Yes.
All right. So then I'll get directly to the abhanga that we are going to look at today.
Uh-huh.
And so this abhanga is from Tukaram Gatha, and that's the single biggest contribution that is considered. That is a collection, an anthology of Tukaram's writings, which are collected together, and they are called Tukaram Gatha. And now in Dehu, which is close to Pune, and Dehu is where Tukaram lived for most of his life, has a mandir now, has a temple called Gatha Mandir. So Tukaram Gatha was was a byword for a lot of people who were interested in saints literature. So this abhanga is number 2877 in this book, in this grantha. And the abhanga is like this. Hechi Thor Bhakti, Awadate Deva, Sankalpavi Maya, Samsarachi. Thevile Anante, Taisechi Rahave, Chitti Asodhyave, Samadhana.
Wow.
Pahilya Udvega, Dukhachi Kevara, Bhogane te Phara, Sanchitache. Tukamhane Ghalu, Tayavari Bhara, Vahu ha Samsara, Deva Pai.
Tukamane, acha ghalu, not jhalo.
Ghalu. Yeah, Tukamhane Ghalu, Tayavari Bhara.
Okay.
So we'll put a burden on him, basically. So we'll look at the translation from first line. So such supreme devotion alone is preferred by Lord, in which we give away any attachment to illusions of the world. When we remain as He has placed us, with contentment in our hearts, while carrying our disappointments and sorrow, accept them merely as the fruits of our past deeds. Tuka says, let us place our burden of the world upon Him and offer this life at His feet, meaning let Him guide us. So that's the translation of all the lines. And if we look at it from spiritual interpretation, and again, whatever we are capable of, because there are a lot of kirtankars and spiritual saints.
They have interpreted
who just
in their
have
own
such
way.
a beautiful way of explaining these abhangas.
Correct.
So we are merely just shabdan se pujari. We worship the words, but the meaning is sometimes more clear to people who actually do meditation.
Experience it. Yeah.
So Sant Tukaram here is defining the devotion or bhakti. What is bhakti? And he's trying to define that, saying Hechi Thor Bhakti. So he emphasizes that the highest form of devotion is not found in grand rituals or external displays. It's not about how much money you can take to a temple or how much you can sacrifice at the feet of God, but it's about cultivating detachment from worldly illusions. So the word is Maya, and the word Maya actually comes from a Vedanta philosophy, and they imagine that everything around us is Maya, which is this is all illusion, it's all going to go away, and that's not real.
Sankalpavi Maya Samsarachi, right? So
right.
Yeah.
So we have to learn to detach from this Maya while maintaining deep contentment in whatever situation we are in. And this is called, also an attitude of complete surrender to the divine will. And Tukaram advocates that when we accept life's highs and lows without any resistance, then we basically trust in the cosmic order. Meaning we don't ask questions like, why me? Why is it happening to me? But whatever happens, we understand that this is the will of God, and we accept that. And so it's best to accept these things gracefully. And Sant Tukaram advises us not to carry the burdens of life alone, but instead offer your struggles to God, and living not for any personal gain, but to follow His will as an act of devotion itself. So when we do that, for example, our burdens become much lighter, because we're merely following His will, His idea of what we are here for, what we are born for, what our purpose is. And as a result, we actually succeed in our life, because He has a plan for us, and we are just sort of like following that plan, going on that path. So we don't need to do much thinking in some ways, or much planning, I should say. We always have to think, but we don't have to worry about who's going to feed us tomorrow, what's going to happen tomorrow. But as long as we do our work diligently and gracefully, we are going to be okay.
We are going to be okay. Yeah.
So in a way, when we are doing philosophical counseling, the first thing we tell people is, until and unless you accept your situation, you won't be able to find any
solution.
Any solution.
Correct.
Any path of how to come out of it.
Yeah.
And on good days, we're all happy. We happily accept whatever is coming our way. But on bad days, it becomes very overwhelming.
Challenging.
And then we can't deal with that. We can't think about, what's the right way out of it.
Right.
And unfortunately, we make our lives much more difficult, by being overwhelmed. So basically, if you follow this path of accepting life as it is and taking it as a blessing, that already sort of cuts down on a lot of our problems, and it paves a path forward. So that's one of the reasons why one can see that this kind of poetry is transcendental or is immortal. Because it addresses the universal human condition, no matter where you are, what region, what background, what religious background, what spiritual background. And in this world today, which is dominated by material pursuits and personal gains, we are always trying to do a bit better than our next door neighbor or our friends on Facebook. Or watching Instagram and thinking oh, but why is it that, I can't do XYZ that the other person is doing? So these simple words offer a compass for inner peace and resilience, because in a way we accept our situation.
Sure.
And that doesn't mean that you're not required to do anything. You are required to do your work. You're required to understand what it is that your duty is and follow that. Simple examples are if you're a student, you have to study. If you're a homemaker, you have to look after your home. If you're a working person, you have to make sure and work well, so earn enough income to support your family. And if you're doing none of that, then you need to figure out what is it that you need to do. What stage of life are you at, and how can you be helpful to people around you? So sometimes it's not possible because we get caught up in the noise. So the detachment is actually it's a very, very difficult thing. And in the Gita or in Indian philosophy, it's called vairagya. So it seems like which takes you towards asceticism. So people think that this kind of word is only applicable to monks and ascetics. But that's sort of like the end stage of the path of detachment. But even getting onto the path of detachment is itself very difficult because, let's say if a child is asked to give away their toy, they don't really like it because it's their toy, and that gives them an identity of who they are. And I am who I am because I have all these things that belong to me. So detachment is a very crucial concept and it's very difficult to understand because it's like, things that belong to you are still yours, but at the same time, your identity is above and beyond them. and you are not you because of what you have around you. So it's a kind of, slightly creating a distance between you and the things around you, and raising yourself above them, which is what Tukaram Maharaj is trying to talk about. And what that does is that it's sort of like, it creates a distance or some level of detachment between you and your material success, your material wealth, status, and possessions. And it allows you to see yourself as a human being, or as a sort of like, well, as a servant of God is how they put it in the Bhakti literature. But servant is not the best description because it has a negative connotation. But you can say, like, as a son of God, or as a child of God, or
Right.
as a sort of,
Disciple.
as a person with a divine spirit, let's put it that way. And it also sort of, gives you inner sense of peace, because then you see yourself as above and beyond all that is surrounding you, and a person on his or her own journey, so to say. And one of the simple techniques, or some of the techniques that they give us is, practicing gratitude, or choosing to live in a mindful way, or choosing minimalism, and stopping the chase for something or the other. And all those things, help you learn detachment.
Sure.
And then we saw, like, acceptance of what it is. And there is a psychological practice called acceptance and commitment therapy, where also one learns to acknowledge life's challenges without being overwhelmed by them. And it's the same concept, because if you don't accept what it is, it just leads you to frustration, anxiety, and all sorts of negative attitudes. So what Sant Tukaram Maharaj is saying is, he's saying, let me remain as the Lord has placed me. Meaning, the way I am is fine enough. Like, I don't need to compare myself with my neighbors, with the Joneses, or anybody for that matter. And I'm a fine specimen of a human being. And once we accept ourselves as we are, then we are not bothered, then we are authentic people. We are not putting on an act. We are not being dramatic. We are coming across as we are, which is true to our thoughts and feelings. And then the poem goes on into, like, how to find contentment in your heart. Tevile anante te sachirahave, chittiya sodhave samadhana. So if you're content in your heart, life seems beautiful. Like, you look around and you feel, you feel good about life. Like, you're not constantly remembering what nasty things somebody said to you about you. Maybe some days ago, some months ago, some years ago, or whatever it is. But you actually learn to enjoy, the beauty of life. And you remember to protect your own peace and contentment from any such, attacks on you. And that does mean that life has no suffering. Life is full of suffering. And it continues to be that way. And the suffering can be in so many different ways. Like, it can be material suffering, it can be spiritual suffering, it can be some health issue, medical issue. It can be so many things that could go wrong. And so you still have to sort of, like, get up each morning and tell yourself that it's okay, and I can go on. So then you stay focused on what you need to do, instead of asking a question like, why is it happening to me? So that's what's talked about in this poem. And finally, the poem talks about living with a higher purpose. And the last line that says, Tukamani ghalu tayavari bhara. Tayavari meaning on God. So we'll put our burden on Him instead of carrying it ourselves. Vahu ha samsara deva pai. So whatever we do, the results are also offered to God, to Him. And so it's, we're sort of like just the instruments of Him to make some contribution to the world. So whether we make those contributions spiritually, through community service, through our work, through creative expression, through personal growth, or through anchoring life, we're basically like, putting ourselves on the path of growth and development. And that's useful for us, and it's also useful for the world, for the society, and that is what, God wants us to do. So again, we're not trying to sort of create any kind of cult or create any. So it's not about whether you're religious or not. It's about whether you can understand from this that there's a definite plan to the world, and you still have to do thinking about what path you're going to choose, what action you're going to choose. And you need both the training of what is the right thing to do, and also what can be done and what needs to be done.
Excuse me.
But at the same time, it teaches you to be in the right frame of mind.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Sorry.
Bless
Yeah.
you. So when you're in the right frame of mind, then you're able to pursue your goals easily. And I think that would be my takeaway from this poem. Would that make sense to you?
Yes, of course. Yeah. Certainly, yes. Very beautifully
Do you have some
narrated.
interesting story that you would like to share?
Oh, no. I was just listening to whatever you had to say, and he's basically an inspirational saint, Sant Tukaram Maharaj.
Yeah,
And
he certainly is. And his sayings are such that you find them very useful in our very day-to-day life.
Right.
Yeah. And especially if you're a student of saints literature or something, both Saint Kabir and Sant Tukaram Maharaj are just such towering figures that you simply cannot ignore them.
Right.
And of course, in the region of Maharashtra, he's a very, very big name.
Sure.
And since we both come from Maharashtra,
Sure.
we certainly have a lot of affection for this name.
Absolutely.
So,
Nice.
so we're going to hear the poem, and Manoj has put it to music. So,
Yes. So this is set to tune in a rag called Shuddha Sarang, and the rhythm that is used is called bhajni tal. So typically for all devotional songs and abhangs, we would typically use this particular rhythmic pattern, and that's why it is called bhajni. So bhajni meaning something that is used for bhajan, and bhajan obviously means something that is devotional music. So with your permission, Ashwini, I'd like to start Hechi Thor Bhakti.
please. Yeah.
Speech off. Tableau level. 1. Tampier 2 level. Tableau on off. Button. Speech off.
हेची थोर भक्ती आवडते देवा, हेची थोर भक्ती आवडते देवा, हेची थोर भक्ती आवडते देवा. संकल्पावी माया संसाराची, संकल्पावी माया संसाराची, हेची थोर भक्ती आवडते देवा, हेची थोर भक्ती आवडते देवा. ठेविले अनंते तैसेची रहावे, ठेविले अनंते तैसेची रहावे, ठेविले अनंते तैसेची रहावे. चित्ती असू द्यावे समाधान समाधान, चित्ती असू द्यावे समाधान समाधान. हेची थोर भक्ती आवडते देवा, हेची थोर भक्ती आवडते देवा. वाहिया उद्वेग दुःखची केवळ, वाहिया उद्वेग दुःखची केवळ, वाहिया उद्वेग दुःखची केवळ. हो वाहिया उद्वेग दुःखची भोगणे ते फळ संचिताचे संचिताचे, भोगणे ते फळ संचिताचे संचिताचे. हेची थोर भक्ती आवडते देवा, हेची थोर भक्ती आवडते देवा. तुका म्हणे घालू तयावरी भार, तुका म्हणे घालू तयावरी भार, तुका म्हणे घालू तयावरी भार तुका म्हणे घालू तयावरी भार वाहुया संसार देवा पायी हो वाहुया संसार देवा पायी वाहुया संसार देवा पायी हेची थोर भक्ती आवडते देवा हेची थोर भक्ती आवडते देवा संकल्पावी माया संसाराची संकल्पावी माया संसाराची हेची थोर भक्ती आवडते देवा हेची थोर भक्ती हेची थोर भक्ती हेची थोर भक्ती आवडते देवा
वा 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 खूपच सुंदर झालं. अतिशय सुश्राव्य कर्णमधुर आणि फारच छान वाटलं.
Thank you so much. And and as I said at the beginning, thank you so much for collecting all these gems of Sant Tukaram Maharaj, and looking forward to many more such gems in the upcoming episodes. So
absolutely.
Anything that you would like to say as
I
your
hope,
closing remarks?
I hope people find it useful, and they like the idea as to why we are trying to create this series. So as to sort of make this information, this knowledge available to the new generation. And there are always people who have been living out of India for some time and are losing touch with our abhang parampara. So they might enjoy it as well. And the music of all the times. I mean, it's always so refreshing to hear bhajan.
So, well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Ashwini, for your wonderful presentation of this abhang, and this completes our first episode of Tukaayan, and I'm sure there are many more to come, so please do look forward. You will probably get the notifications as the video is uploaded on YouTube. So till then, Ashwini, thank you so much, and
Thank you, Manoj.
thanks everyone for your patient hearing, and happy exploring Sant Tukaram Maharaj, and happy being happy. Okay, namaskar.
Namaste.